infrastructure, to jobs, to growth, to housing. Those are some of the issues that Capu Landing hopes to tackle if she becomes elected mayor of the town of Mount Pleasant. I speak exclusively with Capu for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook.
Capu Landing, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, Quintin, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy speaking with you and also to your viewers.
No, that's amazing. We really do appreciate it. Tell me, who is Capu Landing these days?
Well, I am actually someone who has enjoyed tremendously serving the town of Mount Pleasant. Worked hard the last 4 years, and I wanted to continue to do so. But I actually felt that we needed a change. And the idea first came from one of my fellow council members, our Mayor Pro Tem, Tom O'Rourke.
Sure.
Called me and said, Kathy, you need to run for mayor.
Okay.
And he gave me permission to talk about this. And I said, why, Tom? And he said, well, you're passionate about what you do. You have a good business sense. You understand finances long term and how to make sure our town is fiscally sound for many, many years to come. He said, and most important of all, you understand how to handle the negativity and let it roll off your back. And I said, well, gee, Tom, I thought maybe you might run. And he said, no, it has to be you.
Wow.
So I'm a person who loves where I am in life. Our family's grown. Our children are on their own. They're doing great. And just want to continue to make a difference in the world. And starting right here with our community is the best place of all.
You talked about, obviously, when you started 4 years ago, and I remember interviewing you for Quintin's Close-Up for the first time when you ran. What is the biggest difference between 4 years ago and right now when you think of Mount Pleasant Town Council?
The biggest difference is that I think most of us living our lives and running our businesses or raising our families in this community think of this as the most amazing, wonderful place. We know there's traffic issues. That's the number one concern. We know that many of us ran for council at that time to try to slow down the overgrowth we'd had in a hurry of residential. And the fact is that we were outgrowing our infrastructure way too fast. Infrastructure was not keeping up. Businesses and services were not keeping up. And so at that time, we had a number of things that needed to be worked on, and we did work on them as a council together. We have already heard in some cases the current mayor talking about how he accomplished this and he accomplished that. Well, every single thing we did, whether it was building new infrastructure or helping be supportive of the new Lucy Beckham High School, or whether it was slowing residential growth with permit allocations and apartment moratoriums, we actually did all those things together very thoughtfully. Even though I personally am someone who believes you have to let business owners have control of their business to a large degree, we are surrounded by water on three sides and a forest on the other end, and we only have so much room. So what I learned is that we truly need to be thoughtful in the process, to plan things out. And so today what's different is that I've also learned that this council unfortunately has a lot of toxicity. And when I say that, we have people who are passionate about what they're doing. But in the last 4 years, I've worked with 11 other council members total, 12 of us. 9 of us have been attacked publicly on social media, in the newspaper, or in the evening news. On a regular basis in some cases, whenever we didn't agree with this mayor, either by the mayor himself or by his surrogates. And to me, that is not leadership. That is bullying. So what's different today is I'm running for mayor today. I'm not running for council, and I'm running for 3 important reasons. Would you like me to stop there and then tell you later? Or
No, as a matter of fact, you said on March 26th that, quote, it's definitely not out of the question, unquote. What more questions did you have about being mayor before deciding to actually run for mayor?
The most important questions I needed to know at that point, because those folks, and there were several who reached out to me early in the year,
right.
The most important thing I needed to make sure was, could I do this job really, really well? I don't start anything that I can't do really, really well. And I certainly wanted to make sure I would be able to serve the people of Mount Pleasant, devote the time that was needed, and also that it was a viable election opportunity. And what I just discovered through a number of very research-oriented methods is that we, in fact, had a very, very good shot at winning, and at the same time that I could continue to do all the things I've worked hard to do for Mount Pleasant and even more. So once we came to the conclusion that this was a winnable election, I started working as hard as I could to get the ground game in place and get the folks in place, and we've been working hard ever since our announcement June 9th, and really before that. So,
And obviously on August 12th, you officially filed to run for mayor of Mount Pleasant. You said this quote, "It was so wonderful to have my family with me on this special day. We're very excited to continue this campaign to bring positive, proactive leadership to serve the people of Mount Pleasant." But let me ask you a redundant question. What has that proactive, positive leadership been like on Mount Pleasant Town Council?
well, actually, that is one of my first of 3 reasons for running, is that we need a positive, proactive mayor who knows how to collaborate to get things done together. And so the reason that is my number 1 reason for running is because, as I said earlier, we have worked hard on a number of things. And when we were all in agreement, and there were a number of things we were all in agreement on, we all agreed we wanted to do everything we could to preserve the shrimping industry. So we agreed to purchase the Wando docks. We were all in agreement about making sure we did what we could to support the Boone Hall plantation, which, thank goodness for Willie McRae and what he did as a legacy for this town before he passed. Amazing act of selflessness, and so we're thrilled about that. We were all in agreement about things like doing whatever it needed for Park West Boulevard widening, which is now complete and is very, very successful and a great way to get children to school in the morning and everything else. But when we didn't agree, when we voted differently, instead of just having our vote and then going about our business, we often would hear things, again, on social media, in some cases, and this is not always me. In fact, it wasn't even me at all for the first couple of years, because the mayor and I tended to vote similarly on a lot of things. We actually started seeing it with other folks, and when you see people's names on social media that they voted the other way, and then they start getting attacked, that's just wrong. And so my feeling is, we're all representing our constituents, we're all elected officials, we all deserve the respect of each other and civility, and it starts at the top. If I as a mayor, which I will do, I will pledge to absolutely stay positive and make sure that when we discuss things, when we debate things, and even when we disagree, that we're still civil about it, and that afterwards people will know, hey, I may not agree with you, but I still respect you and your position, and go home and live our lives. So it's very, very important that we have a change in our direction, because Mount Pleasant is a wonderful place to live. I think we'd all agree we came here, if we weren't natives, we came here because we love it. Many of us came here a long time ago. I originally came in 1984 with my husband, who was a Navy officer, moved back to the area 17 years ago. But there are many people that just moved here in the last couple of years, and they want to feel that this is their hometown too. So my second reason for running, actually, is because I want to be I will be a mayor for all of Mount Pleasant, not just a select group, not just a certain part of town, but the entire community. And we do have about 95,000 people. So that's going to take a very high energy mayor, and I have a tremendous amount of energy. I always have, and I've even seen in the last few years how even when I'm stretched thin, I still manage to keep up with everything that I'm expected to do. And more.
Where exactly do you believe this current mayor is allegedly just focused on as far as geographics?
Well, there's been a sense out there for a long time that a lot of the focus was south of the IOP connector. I don't like to point out specifics too much, but I'll just say that when it comes to things that affect the northern end of town, whether it's anything in the Highway 41 corridor, up until very recently with the re-election bid by our current mayor, there hasn't been much focus at all on what's going on. And so, we have worked on a few projects that were brought to us by staff that we had to approve, such as the Park West Boulevard widening. But the reality is, we need to make sure that folks from all over the community know that they're a part of this. And you can't just talk about that. You have to be deliberate in that process, which I have been the whole time. I've been informing the folks north of the connector and the 41 corridor area using methods like Nextdoor, not for campaigning, but for informing the public about what's going on. 17,000 people or so following that on that end of town. Also getting out when we have ribbon cuttings.
Right.
I'm the first person out there most of the time. A couple other folks join us sometimes, but we've had a lot of businesses open on that side of town, and that side of town is the one that really doesn't have. They have a lot of services lacking, and so I just think rather than talking about what he's doing that is too narrowly focused, I'd rather talk about the fact that I've been all over this community. We live in Dunes West. Our office is right here at Patriots Point. We actually go to church on Coleman Boulevard. My pharmacy is Pitt Street Pharmacy. I live all over this town. I love the whole town, and I intend to serve the whole town.
Let me stop you there, Kathy. The Shem Creek music debate obviously paid for police and fire. The boutique hotel that's being proposed right there near Mill Street. Where has Capu Landing been?
Mm-hmm. Well, have I been? Okay, so let's start with on the pay. Let's start with the pay because this has been out there a lot. So, like all council members, we were supposed to see a wage and compensation study. It was being worked on last year, and you might say, well, why last year? Because we have a 4-year rotation. The last time a full study was done was 2016. In the interim, we voted in each and every year a wage increase, and I believe it was 4% every year, so it was above the inflation rate. And then the intention in 2020 early was to finish that study and bring it to us, and I believe it was going to be brought in March or April before we completed our new budget, which would start on July 1st. And then COVID hit. And again, no excuses. This is a fact of what happened. As soon as COVID hit and businesses were locking down, and we especially knew our town would be hit very, very hard by the hospitality industry being shut down so much, we voted to freeze jobs and wages, but not to furlough or lay anybody off. And so that did put things on hold. Now, this year, as we started to emerge after vaccinations and so forth, and the numbers were coming down, and we were able to start living our lives a little more normally again, we took a look and we said, you know what, if we just take last year's study, that's not going to be sufficient because we've had another year of inflation. Quite frankly, we've had a year where a lot of folks, we had high unemployment, but now people are slowly coming back to work, and we know that people need to be paid even more to be attracted back into the workforce. So what we did is we said, let's get an updated version. So it's really going to be a 5-year wage and compensation study by the time we see it. We're supposed to see it either this month or next at the latest. I'm pushing for this month because the intention is not just to give a regular 4% increase like we've already done for this year. The intention is to go ahead and bring salaries up to a level that would be more commensurate with what people would expect and be very competitive with our neighbors. There's been an awful lot of talk that we're not, and we do understand that things fell behind, but people do have to realize when you go to a fast food store right now and you see a sign that says a really high wage, wages have jumped because we cannot get workers, not in Mount Pleasant and not in a lot of places in this country. And so we recognize that, and we're going to make up for it. Now, you mentioned about the Shem Creek, music?
Yes, the music controversy down there. There's too much loud music at Big Crease. Where were you on this issue?
Okay, so this is an issue that has been ongoing at various times. We do have a noise ordinance related to the time of the night.
Right.
It is an issue that has to be enforced, obviously, if someone's complaining. And so I believe strongly we need to enforce the laws that are on the books. And if someone is calling us because there's loud music at 11 or 12 or midnight, or 1 o'clock in the morning, and of course Shem Creek, there are some folks that live fairly close to all those restaurants and bars. So we do need to enforce what's on the books now. And if we do that, we should have a much better result. You're not going to be able to just ask people, hey, could you just turn it down a little bit? That's unfortunately not going to work most of the time. So, and then the third one that you mentioned, would you
Yes, ma'am. The boutique hotel right down here at Mill
Street, right. So the issue here, and this is the part about government that is really hard for a lot of people. I said as my first reason for running, we need a proactive mayor. So this particular hotel, everything about this situation was permitted many years ago, and it just never came out of the ground. As soon as I heard about this coming up, I rode back down. I ride down Mill Street all the time. We go to the various restaurants there, and I rode by again and took a look at the spot. And the reality is it's very, very hard once something's been permitted years ago to come back later and take that away. So I believe one of the best answers is, first of all, let's work with that business owner. Let's see, first of all, is there any way that they could build something that would not feel so impactful to the area? And I'm not sure what that would be. I'll throw out an example of perhaps like a professional medical office or something where you have, dentists or doctor's offices or something, because they own the land. It is an empty lot. It's not like they're cutting down a bunch of trees. So probably something was going to go there. My feeling is, why don't we get ahead of the game and all over town, there are places where there are for sale signs. There are properties that are owned that are not developed yet. Let's reach out as a council proactively, and I think it starts with the mayor, and let's find out, what is it you're thinking of building? What would you like to do with this property? And then find out what the people in the neighboring area would love to see there, and see if we can't marry those two things. It sounds like a pipe dream, but it's not. It's a matter of messaging and communication. And I believe strongly, I've talked about this on the Economic Development Committee for several years, and I think people have sort of struggled to understand what I meant. But what I mean is, when you see a sign that says this property is available, let's call that number and say, okay, when you're representing this owner of this property, what is it they're hoping to build, or what are they hoping to do? Let's get this thing solved so that we have things in Mount Pleasant that people really need and want, and especially if it's right in their own backyard.
As a matter of fact, did the town or the architect poll the community before this happened?
The town did not. I don't know whether the architect did. The town's involvement, to my knowledge, now the town has a planning committee, obviously, right, and things did come to the planning department. Excuse me, we have a planning department and a planning committee. Right. This came to the planning department. Right. That's another thing. I would like to see more things when they're brought early stage. I would like to see those at least communicated to planning committee and the mayor and council early on, even if they don't need something specific from us, even if they don't need a variance or a zoning change or anything like that, those things should be communicated very early in the process, because it's a lot easier to head something off at the pass, so to speak, if it's really early in the process, than to wait until the day that an announcement is being made and something's going to the DRB review or the Design and Review Board or one of the other groups, because by then it's pretty far down the road and people are very upset.
How is there a 3-year moratorium on home building but not on retail and commercial?
Okay, so the moratorium is on multifamily. And it has an exception, which is for workforce housing, because we do have a serious problem in Mount Pleasant that we need more of our workers. And these are people that, have salaries, but salaries that don't necessarily allow them to live comfortably in Mount Pleasant. And some of these are the most, the first responders, our fire and police, our teachers, our nurses, scrub nurses, med techs. There's so many different jobs, and hospitality workers. And we can't keep having 30,000 people a day cross the bridge from elsewhere to work in Mount Pleasant and not be able to live anywhere nearby. Now, we can't fit 30,000 people more here either. We're already very, very crowded. But one of the ways to help traffic congestion is to try to get more people to live close by to where they work. And so that's why we have an exception. But your question was, how can we have a moratorium on this but not that? What we have for housing is, for regular homes, is we have a permit allocation system. And this has worked very well. We all voted for this. It was unanimous. And it slowed the growth rate, as far as we can tell, it slowed the growth rate from about 4% a year, which was unsustainable, to around 2% a year, which is a little better and allows us to let the infrastructure and so forth catch up. Now, on the commercial side, I believe there's a misconception out there. There's a belief that if you have commercial things, that's also bad. Here's the problem. If we don't have service, and I'm not talking about the boutique hotel, I'm talking about things that bring jobs that we don't have. For instance, I've been focusing quite a bit on technology, recruiting technology-related things. And we have a technology campus that is going to be built. It's already been announced on Long Point Road, where there was an old concrete plant. We're not removing a bunch of beautiful trees. Instead, we're going to be getting rid of a bunch of, basically a dump, old piles of concrete, and working on other things that will bring jobs and services. Because if you have jobs and services, not only does that help you pay your bills long term as a town because of the ongoing revenue, but in addition, it helps people work in high-paying jobs on this side of the bridge. So we're helping traffic congestion by limiting how far people have to go for work, and we're also helping with long-term viability financially of Mount Pleasant. So I think the misconception is that all growth, all development is bad. What we want is, we want really to have businesses and services and jobs catch up, so that we have the things we need, especially on the other end of town. In the southern, we're sitting right here, right looking out on the Yorktown, but on the northern end of town, there are a lot of services and jobs that are missing, and the folks up there would really love to see that. And that wouldn't hurt the congestion down here so much. It would actually probably help it, because people wouldn't have to travel so far to work.
Let me get back to the boutique hotel. Can it be built without any variances or wetland offsets being granted?
I actually am not that far in the weeds on it. I don't believe there's wetlands right there. I've driven by it. It's a lot. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think that particular hotel, they have what they need as far as that goes.
Okay.
I think the number one thing that I have heard is that at this point they need, there is one type of variance. I think something will come to the Board of Zoning Appeals. But that's not council.
Yes.
And I'm not quite sure what that is, the details on that yet. But what I can tell you is that, once again, the more proactive we can be early on in the process, the better off we are. And this really, to me, this should never have gotten this far. We should never have gotten to a place where this turned into something where everybody was really upset. There are a lot of people on council that are saying, why didn't we know about this earlier? And I know there's a lot of people in the neighborhood there that are saying that. And the reality is, because there's too much sitting back and reacting. And again, I think that strategy needs to change completely. As mayor, I will make sure that we have a much more proactive way of approaching all these issues. Let's make sure we're informed early so we can inform the public. We had an issue the other day. I got a call and I went down to an area right around Spites Field, Patty Spites Field.
Right.
And these were folks in the old village, and they called me and I came right down. I rearranged my schedule and came right down. Spent almost 2 hours riding around in golf carts to see what was going on there, because we're going to be doing the drainage project for Royal Basin and Royal Avenue Basin, and we were going to be using that area as our laydown field for all the equipment and pipes and so forth. And the people in that neighborhood were able to show me very clearly that that was not safe for the children that walk through that field to get to school every day at Mount Pleasant Academy. And they were able to also demonstrate very clearly all the things this field is used for that may not be official, but are used all the time. And based on that, I and actually my fellow councilman Gary Santos also went down there, ended up coming back and saying, hey, we need to change this. This did not take an act of council. It simply took, saying to our administrator, we really need to make this change. And I know they do the best they can, but I think there are times where people, they count on us, the elected officials, to listen and to be their voice and to make sure that when things need to get done, they will get done, and not have to feel like you're fighting City Hall all the time. So I feel like, just like with the boutique hotel that you keep bringing up, that we need to be proactive, we need to listen, and we need to get out there whenever needed and make a change early in the process, if at all possible.
When did the town tear down? What did the town actually tear down before this proposal for this boutique hotel?
Well, I don't know what was there before. I know now it's an empty, grassy lot. So I think we're spending a lot of time on something that doesn't have as much to, it's important right this minute, but 4 or 5 months from now, I think we'll be on to other things. So I'd love to be able to talk about other things that I'm working on. We've got a lot of exciting projects coming, got a lot of things that will help us. But as far as what was there before and what did the town, I don't know that that's going to tell people that much about what kind of mayor I'll be. So.
Speaking of being mayor, I know obviously the big topic right now is about the police and fire pay. Mm-hmm. Why does the current mayor think that a 4% will work?
Well, I don't think that the current mayor or myself or any of council believes 4% will work. 4% is the annual, we have been using 4%, CPI is the guideline, but inflation's been very low until this year. Right. And so 4% was our annual figure, and I believe it was all 4 years that I've been on council that we voted for a 4% increase. That was in between the regular full wage studies. The wage studies are done in order to take other factors into consideration besides inflation. And so from 2016 to 2020, there were a lot of factors that would have caused, including low unemployment. Up until COVID hit, we had extraordinarily low unemployment. In fact, in Mount Pleasant, it was around 1.8%, so it's less than 2%, and that was February of 2020. Hard to believe before COVID hit. So I think all of us on council believe that we needed to adjust wage and compensation very much to what's been going on in the world and what's been going in our part of the state, and also specific to Mount Pleasant. We lost that opportunity last year because of everything having to be frozen. On the other hand, we did not lay anybody off or furlough anybody. And we did everything we could to help people be safe in the town in terms of town workers. And at the same time, we now know we have to catch up. And there's been a lot made of the fact that we're behind the 8 ball on this one, but we did everything we could at that time, and we're going to make sure that we get things right when we do this this study that's being brought. I believe it's being brought next week. I believe it's going to be brought in September, but if it's not, it's October. We're going to make sure. I'm pushing for it to be brought in September.
Does that come out to pennies because they are so underpaid at this point when you look at the 4%?
Well, again, if you're talking about 4% of a certain salary level, I'm just going to throw out a number for no particular reason. I'll throw out $40,000. So 4% of $40,000, $1,600 a year. Yes, on a monthly basis, that only works out to, what, about $140 or so. So the issue is not that. It's the wage and compensation package. It is going to be considerably more than the inflation-based number. So I would expect this number to be a good bit more than 4%. I don't have the numbers yet. I haven't seen them. We didn't even get to see the one from last year because it wasn't quite complete.
Right.
But we will have that very shortly, and I fully expect that the salaries will go up commensurate with that.
Will you, as Mayor Capu, direct the fire department or the police department to develop a special pay incentive plan for all ranks to earn extra incentive pay for specific job functions and tasks, and actually implement it through some sort of negotiation process?
We have right now a merit-based pay system, including things like if someone has gone and gotten extra degrees. One of the things I've heard former Chief Ritchie talk about is that our police department, all these folks have degrees, and they actually have some financing of if they want to go back to school and get further degrees. And so we have a very, very expert, well-trained force. Same thing with the fire department. They do an excellent job. They're well-trained. They work very, very hard. All of these folks we have incredibly low crime. We have a great track record on, we already know we have great levels of, even when the standardized tests are coming through on the awards, really we're at the gold level for the police, and we're at one of the highest levels, not the highest, but one of the highest on the fire department. We do have an aspirational goal of getting to the highest level. We added 6 new people on the force 2 years ago, and then we added another 6 recently, and we are on a track, a strategic plan right now to add more. In the full 5 years from when we did that, which I believe was a year and a half ago, we plan to add considerably more folks because we do want to reach the gold standard, or whatever it is called in the case of the fire department. So the answer is, I believe we already have, I know we already have merit-based achievement areas, and I would love to see that increased even more. Again, they do a fantastic job. I believe we have the finest police and fire department anywhere, and certainly the results show that. So we just want to make sure they are happy and stay here, and I know that's something that, again, this wage and compensation will go a long way towards helping.
Let me stop you there. I understand that at least 20 officers have quit the force recently, police and fire. What is the retention rate within the police and fire departments in Mount Pleasant?
Well, again, we have had a sudden change, so I don't have the current retention rate per se, because it has changed because of those recent either resignations or retiring. Some were retiring, most were resignations. But I will say that this is one of the things that a lot of the messaging is that we didn't keep up. We are about to make a major change here, and so once that change is made, and when people are happy with how they're being paid and they feel like they're being compensated, I think that will change things a lot. I would have liked to see us make more of these changes earlier, no doubt about it. I feel that maybe even waiting this long to get that wage and compensation study updated was too long. I mean, if we had had that wage and compensation updated 6 months ago, I think we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We'd be talking about other things, but we wouldn't be talking about this because it would already have been addressed for this year's budget. One of the things that was tricky, and I will say again, this is not an excuse, this is a COVID thing, is that we do our business revenue billing in April, and it comes in by the end of June, and then we know what we have to deal with, or in July, then we know what we have to deal with through the new year.
Sure.
And so we didn't, until we saw that, we didn't know if we were going to be way down because of businesses that closed due to COVID, or whether we would still be at the level we were last year. As it turns out, we got a pleasant surprise, and it was a lot better than we expected. So we're very excited about moving forward from here.
But would a small increase in taxes more than cover the increase in pay for these police officers and firemen?
Again, we already have room. I've already asked the question specifically and gotten a generalized answer from it, but I know that it's going to be sufficient. We already have in our budget, based on what came in the business revenue, because Mount Pleasant fared a lot better than people expected. We fared a lot better than a lot of other communities, even across the state and certainly across the country. And when I say we fared better, business in general did so much better than we thought. Our two biggest industries by far are hospitality and healthcare. Right. And our numbers, you would have expected hospitality to really be slammed. And instead, they actually did everything they could the workers worked incredibly hard to make sure that we were open for business as soon as we could be safely, and that we were employing practices that would help people feel comfortable coming here into the Low Country for vacations and so forth, and it worked. And the result is, and of course our healthcare were incredibly busy, and so what the result was that our business revenue numbers actually did very well. And so because of all of that, we are going to be able to raise wages considerably. Do I know what that number is today? No, but I might know it as little as a week and a half from now. And so if we were having this interview in 2 weeks, I can give you a different answer. Hopefully a much more clear, specific answer. But what I can tell you is we don't need to raise taxes to do it. We simply needed to know how bad was it, did we fare okay, and how are we doing? And we actually ended up doing much better than expected. By the way, yes, during COVID, we ended up having a tremendous number of businesses come here, and I'd like to highlight some of the reasons why. First of all, Mount Pleasant was very careful and thoughtful in their process of how to deal with COVID. One of the things that happened during this time, because it was obviously a big shock to everyone, we hadn't dealt with a global pandemic before, and so one of the things was, how do we deal with things like the lockdowns? And then when we were opening up, how do we have people open up safely? We were brought an ordinance by our current mayor that was from the city of Charleston, and it talked about things like distancing, masking, disinfecting countertops, putting up, partitions, things of that nature. And we discussed it. Do we put something like this in place? And I raised the question, has anybody looked at the enforcement? And nobody had. So I read it out loud, and what it said was that for the first infraction, if this wasn't if the people didn't follow this exactly, and that means if they were caught without somebody having their mask on that moment, or maybe they didn't disinfect, or maybe they didn't space as well as they were supposed to, it was a $500 fine. For the second one, a $500 fine. And for the third infraction, 30 days in jail. Now, would we ever have enforced that? I don't know. But what I can tell you is I sure wouldn't have wanted Mount Pleasant, South Carolina to be like Austin, Texas, where the beauty parlor owner was sent to jail. So that was something I stood up against, because I said, we are not sending business owners to jail over COVID. We're going to do everything we can to put good guidelines out there, but we're not going to do things like that. So I think one of the reasons Mount Pleasant is a place that people came during this time and opened their business, which was actually a thrill, because we did lose businesses too, was because of the fact that we were more reasonable with the things that we did to try to protect our citizens. And in addition to that, we also had very low crime. As we all know, we had the terrible, terrible tragedy of the George Floyd incident and his death last year. And Mount Pleasant, almost right after it happened, I actually called Chief Ritchie, and I did an interview with him. He permitted me to do so. I asked all the tough questions. Do we do chokeholds? Do we do no warrant break-ins? Do we do, or arrests and that? Do we, any of the things that were the biggest issues, and the op-ed is actually on my website, CapuLanding.com, and you can go under media, news, and it's right there. It was in the Moultrie News, and it turned out the reason we have a gold star rating for our police department is because we already were ahead on all of those issues. We already didn't have any of those policies. So we have the lowest crime in the area, by far, very low crime in Mount Pleasant, and it's because we have a tremendous police department, and we stand behind them, and that's why we're going to make sure they get a good raise.
Let me go to that. You obviously talked about the George Floyd death and obviously the protests that took place thereafter. I know this is something that's going on right now and reported in the Post and Courier. Spontaneous protesters, that is, will no longer be allowed under a plan making its way right now to Mount Pleasant Town Council. Let me ask you, Cappy, why do you all keep trying to make laws and ordinances that clearly are not going to stand up to legal scrutiny?
Well, so there's a difference between having a gathering of few folks and having a protest that turns into a very large rally. And we have laws, we have ordinances on the books that require a permit when it's a gathering of a certain size, and so that permit has to be given in advance, and it's applied in all different directions. People should know we have had things come up from different groups. We've had one recently that wanted to do a protest thing at Shem Creek on the bridge, and that was related to people that that wanted to protest masks in the schools, and they didn't have the permit in advance. So the reason we do that is because in order to keep reasonable law and order and have it be a peaceful assembly, you do have to have a little planning. You have to have your first responders prepared. They have to be able to be out there. And with social media nowadays and with different things, I mean, I'm aware there's an app out there, Meetup, for people to, meet up for, just to get together for dinner or whatever. But you can also use a lot of these same types of apps to get a group of people together that want to cause mayhem. So we want people to be able to have First Amendment rights, no question about it. But if it's going to be a large group of a certain size, then they do need a permit. And the Chief of Police, Chief Arnold, did ask us to give a little more time on that. We still have to debate that, so that's not a decided issue yet, but he is bringing that to us from what I understand, and we will be discussing that. And as far as something that'll hold up to legal scrutiny, no, I am absolutely very big on making sure we don't start saying things or doing things that will go against our state's laws, against our governor, or against our attorney general, who will clearly come down quickly if there's something that's not right. But I also am a big believer in home rule. Mount Pleasant is a beautiful, special place, and we want to make sure that we can determine to a large degree, as long as we are, as in my opinion, as long as we are following the law of the land, the Constitution, and in this case, the First Amendment, our ability to have peaceful assembly and so forth, no question we want to be able to do that. What we don't want is, we don't want here in Mount Pleasant what happened on King Street that night of the terrible riots. 120 businesses were either destroyed or badly damaged, and that should never ever have happened, and it could have been done like we did ours, which was with a permit at Waterfront Park.
Right.
Chief Ritchie and Chief Mixon and all of our folks with the public service, Jody, who is around retired, but they led an incredible effort to protect the whole perimeter.
Right.
And to have something where people could speak their minds, and they could protest, and they could shout, and they could sing, they could do whatever they needed to do. But when it was all said and done, it was peaceful. It didn't harm our citizens. It didn't harm our businesses. And I think that's the right way for us to continue to do things.
Let me be said, what's more important for Mount Pleasant right now? Building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, or better utilizing the existing homes and storefronts?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an excellent question, because it brings up the point of, we do have a lot of locations, as an example, where we had restaurants or we had businesses that for whatever reason did end up leaving, whether it was COVID, whether it was other problems, whether it was personal issues. And one of the things I've worked hard on economic development to do is we now have a database of every single location in town that is basically ripe for being retaken over, so that someone can come in and either remodel it or use it the way it is, or whatever the circumstances are. And that is ideal, because if we could have all those empty spaces utilized first, that obviously limits how much new building there needs to be. I do believe we still need to keep home building versus commercial in a little different category, and the reason is because we do have right now a number of areas where we need more jobs and services. Mm-hmm. And as an example, we have commercial land out in the north end of town that is already earmarked for it. Something will be built there, and it's in places where it makes sense, where it's near major infrastructure, not necessarily right near homes or anything. Right. And so I don't think that we necessarily want to say, all commercial building is bad, because I really don't believe it. I really believe what we need is a good balance. And what happened in the post-2008 period, where a lot of land was converted from commercial to residential, and we ended up with homes and apartments springing up in places that were, quite frankly, not able to be supported by the infrastructure. I think that's one of the reasons I ran, is because that just doesn't make sense. You need the infrastructure in place, but you also need the jobs and services near where people live. So what we're essentially trying to do, especially on that end of town, although again there are some storefronts empty here too, in this end of town, but we need to essentially retrofit in what was missing. And the best place to start are, and I'll give you an example of things I've worked on already. I've taken restaurateurs over to people that are owners of businesses, over to Cracker Barrel and over to Carrabba's and over to other locations that are now empty to try to show them, here's an example where we would love to have a restaurant. We'd love to have a business that services our community, and but it takes a lot. We've got a lot of issues, and staffing is a huge problem for everybody.
Where are going to be the black restaurants in the town of Mount Pleasant?
I'm sorry?
Where are going to be the black restaurants?
Black restaurants?
African American restaurants. How many of those do you want to recruit to that area in the north part of town?
Oh, well, I hadn't thought of it in terms of black or white or any other, but I can tell you this. I've worked very closely with a number of folks who have said they want to bring, which I think it'd be fantastic. We used to have a Gullah-Geechee restaurant right in the heart of the town, and I've talked to the Askew family as an example. I know Craig has a lot of interest not only in having another restaurant on this end of town, in town in general, but actually on that end of town, I think they have some property where we were talking about an entire center that would not only have a restaurant or two, but also have essentially a museum, a place to sell, whether it's sweetgrass baskets, which of course are indigenous to our area, well, originally came from other places, but have been here for a long, long time, and we're proud of it. And we want to make sure that people can get the true Gullah-Geechee experience when they're here. Why not? This is such a popular place to visit, and they really need the true culture of Mount Pleasant. So yes, I would love to promote that, and I've already been talking with folks and listening to what they'd like to do to make that happen.
And what direction is the town headed towards as far as providing subsidized housing to a broad spectrum of residents?
So we have a terminology that we call workforce housing, and the reason we use that term is, first of all, it's not subsidized by our taxpayers. What it is we helped a group get started. It was a task force originally started by Thomasina Stokes Marshall when she was on council many years ago, and it was to study how to have something that was affordable, because Mount Pleasant has become so expensive. A lot of people don't realize even a simple one-bedroom apartment is priced way over what most people, if they're starting out as teachers, firefighters, police, nurses, scrub nurses, med techs, hospitality workers, all of these areas, we need all of these workers to live many of those are urgently needed to live close to where they work, especially first responders, but even the others as well. And a lot of them have to commute in from the far end of McClellanville or from Goose Creek or from somewhere else. It's a little more affordable to live. So this was started, and it was a task force that right at the beginning of when I was on council, we spun it off to become a nonprofit organization. So we did provide some seed money to help them get started as a nonprofit, and we have given them a reasonable grant more than once now, I believe 2 times, in order to help keep that going until they could start bringing in revenue. And what's happened because of Mount Pleasant Housing for All is that we now have our first privately developed homes, townhomes, in the Gregory Ferry Road area. So for anyone who's not familiar with that, that's right off of a road called Winnowing Way, which most people are also not familiar with. Right. But where this is it's right off of 17, not too far from the 41 intersection. It's right near Mount Pleasant Hospital. It's right near Oakland Shopping Center. There's an awful lot of things going on there, and those folks all need people that can work there. And so we're very excited to say this was all done with private money, and over half of those, I believe, now I know it was half about 2 months ago, so probably over half of those 36 townhomes, which are coming out of the ground now, and they're, from what I saw from the pictures, they're going to be very, very nice, and they're in a place that's close to major infrastructure, and that's the key. Where people get worried is they say, I don't want something that's priced a lot lower than the average right near my home that's more expensive. We hear that a lot from people. And what folks need to understand is this, again, needs to be a thoughtful, proactive process. And when it's something that is right near commercial development, right near major infrastructure, and not necessarily right near homes that are of the same size, it's not going to hurt people's home values. This is a very specialized situation. Mount Pleasant is a very expensive place, and it's getting more expensive all the time, and we need our essential workers to work close by where they're working. I mean, we need them to be close by, so it also helps with traffic congestion when they do that.
Can you identify, Kathy, any housing trends in this town, such as increase in absentee landlords, mortgage foreclosures, decreasing home values, and or increasing house prices?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, we had the assessment that the county did of where the home values were over the last 5 years, and when that came in, we had an incredible jump. The max that they can do is a cap of 15%, and I think we came in somewhere around 10 to 12% countywide. I think it was even a little more in Mount Pleasant, but basically around 10 to 12% over 5 years. So we know prices have gone up. In general, home prices have gone up. As far as identifying any other trends like a lot of mortgage foreclosures. Certainly COVID caused a lot of hardship for a lot of folks. There were, of course, different forgivenesses of rent and mortgage payments through various institutions. As a town, I don't think it's right for me to speak specifically about what each individual landlord or bank did in the case of things that were mortgage related. But I will say that in general, Mount Pleasant fared very, very well. What we want to try to do is going forward, we want to continue to bring great jobs here, because once you have great jobs and great businesses on this and diversification of our economy, it can't all be hospitality and healthcare, which is why we're working right now very hard on bringing both technology, which I've already mentioned. We're working on things that are very closely related to healthcare services, not necessarily hospitals and doctors' offices and dentist offices, but things that are research-oriented and things that are other areas of, well, home care, of course. We have a lot of senior citizens here. And then we're also working hard, believe it or not, we've been working hard now, not believe it or not, for sure. We have the Port Authority here, and because of that, we've been working hard on recruiting things related to the port. We actually had a company come here recently, the Bourne Group, and not to be confused with the Bourne movies. And they specifically they chose Mount Pleasant. We just recruited them in the last year, and they chose it because of the Port Authority being here, and they do work associated with various services for ships. Yes. So we can do more of that. We are doing more of that. We have several things in the works as I speak that are related to both shipping and logistics that will be terrific for Mount Pleasant. So as far as housing trends is what you were asking me about, but I think the most important thing is let's get great paying jobs, let's get more services on this side of the bridge, and that in itself, along with what we have in place on the permit allocation and so forth, will help our community thrive without being overrun, which is what we all want to stop that.
How many jobs have been brought to Mount Pleasant over the past year?
I can't name the exact number of jobs. That I would not be able to tell you. But I do know we brought a number of businesses. Unfortunately, we also lost a number of businesses, especially in the hospitality industry, mostly restaurants, that left. But I do know we've brought a number of companies, and the things we brought here really tended to be more in technology, software, and as I said, health services and health sciences related. So, and of course I mentioned the one related to shipping. So in the future, one of the visions I have that I think we're very close to perhaps having happen, people are aware that we have film companies that love to come here and use our venues. The problem, it seems nice, and some people enjoy being on, the extras list or being part of the cast, the crew, and helping out and getting part-time jobs. The problem is when they're done, they leave, and all the revenue goes somewhere else. Something that would fit very, very well here, and that I've been working hard on, is not specifically film, but content production. A lot of people don't realize we have a television production company right here, headquartered in Mount Pleasant, that produces 600 hours a year of broadcast television, and yet almost all the filming happens elsewhere, and all of the post-production, which is where the permanent jobs are, happens in places like LA and New York. We have a company right here in Mount Pleasant that moved from Burbank. They love being here. I've met with the CEO of both of these companies. They want to stay here, but when they go to produce righteous gemstones, they do so in the Sears building over at Citadel Mall because there are no studios here. When Serena Williams comes, and I know that's Daniel Island, she plays tennis over in Daniel Island, but if she needs to do a 30-second spot for Nike or for anybody else, she has to get on a plane and fly to Atlanta to their production studios because we don't have a green screen soundstage anywhere in the state of South Carolina that would be appropriate for commercials. And so what I'm talking about is we need something that would allow for permanent content production because it is not a huge facility. It's about the size of a grocery store. You could have a three studio, working studios. Some could be for video game filming, some could be for streaming type shows, some could be for commercials, and working 365 days a year producing a lot of revenue and have the post-production. And what is post-production? Post-production are jobs of people sitting behind a computer doing colorization or sound effects or other types of special effects. Believe it or not, it's just a desk job in many, many cases, and they're high paying, and they take a lot of technological knowledge and obviously computer savvy. And the great thing about it is it's the exact type of thing that would fit into Mount Pleasant because it doesn't require a lot of space, it doesn't use our aquifer or our water supply, and it's just an ideal thing. So that's the kind of thing I envision in terms of future jobs and how to get things going for Mount Pleasant and keep it in a way that will really help us all feel good about it and be proud of our town.
And unfortunately, the battery's running a little bit. But let me ask you, how many town contracts were awarded in 2019-2020?
How many town contracts for what, home building, commercial?
Yes,
I don't have the total number. I don't have the total number of contracts awarded for business off the top of my head. No, I can get that for you.
Okay. And how do you think being the only council member to vote against the plastic ban will fare with your residents who you want to vote for you?
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the questions that is out on a current push poll. Push polls are a survey that are intended to give a desired result, and right now they're trying to make me sound like I'm anti-environment because I didn't vote for the plastics ordinance. It was not against plastic bags, it was against many different types of takeout containers and cups and so forth, and here is why I voted against that. It was at the time, it was brought through and it was said that it was a long time coming, but it was not a long time coming to council. We got it in January, we saw it again in February, and I believe the final vote was in March. Right. And so it was basically an introduction and then 2 readings. And I can tell you what I said that night, and the environmentalists in the room appreciated it. I am actually very, very pro the environment, and I do a lot of things on a regular basis. And a good example is I announced that night, I said, here's an alternative. And I came up with a PowerPoint. I did it in one weekend. Came up with a PowerPoint. I showed all the conflicts of interest and unintended consequences that could come of this ordinance. I studied that ordinance carefully, and I demonstrated, here's what could happen, here's what could happen. Let me give you some examples. One of the things in this ordinance is that if someone is in the town of Mount Pleasant as a business and they want to cater something on the Yorktown, they have to follow our ordinance. Sure. And they have to use, a certain type of paper plates, or they have to have, whatever type of forks and things like that. But if someone bids for the same exact job from West Ashley, they can use whatever they want. And so what we're doing is undercutting our own businesses. And I pointed that out that night. And I said, maybe there's a better way to do this. One of the unintended consequences even I didn't think of was that people would say, oh, we can't use this thickness of plastic bag. Well, we'll go with one that's 10 times thicker. So it went beyond the level of what was in the ordinance. So now we have places all over town, I won't name names, but a lot of major stores that have very, very thick bags. And those will not break down in the landfill quicker. So what I did is I offered an incentive-based plan called Mount Pleasant Eco-Friendly Partners that included things like encouraging businesses and giving them incentives if they did things like not use plastic bags, not use styrofoam containers, not use. So I had a whole list of things. If they would choose 5 or 6 things, then they could be on our eco-friendly partners. Why did I do that? Because when you base things on choices that people can make for the betterment of the community, you're more likely to get a lot of people on board, and it makes for a much stronger community. I will tell you something that probably people don't want to hear, but I pay attention in town, and we eat out a fair amount. I cook at home at night a lot, but we eat out for lunch a lot. And in the last week alone, I've probably been in at least 6 businesses that are not following the ordinance right now. And the reality is, if we were enforcing this ordinance, the third step of the enforcement is a fine, and then boom. The third step is business revocation of their license. And so we would actually be kicking a lot of businesses out of town right now. Now, how would that be after what's happened with COVID? We've already lost a lot of businesses. So my feeling is, let's do things that we work together as a community to solve problems, instead of doing things that mandate things that cause unintended consequences.
Where are the enforcement officers?
Well, that was one of the things we brought up that night. There is only one code enforcement officer for the entire town. And we have 95,000 people now. At that time it was a little bit lower, but it was still a large number. And how in the world are people going to go in and keep up with this? This was the same thing we had with other issues later that were ordinances. The reality is, if it's hard to enforce or almost impossible to enforce, it really ought to be a form of a resolution. By the way, I took the Municipal Association of South Carolina's training classes. Right. And I graduated from that program, and I'm not saying that to brag, because a lot of people don't think it's a big deal. It is a big deal, because when you take those classes, it's a great refresher on things that you already know, but it teaches you a few new things as well. And one of them is about governance. And the difference between a resolution and an ordinance is very, very clear. A resolution is something where we believe strongly as council that we want a message. We would really love for our citizens to follow this, or our businesses to follow this, and we give our reasons why. Or whatever the situation is. It might be something to the governor, it might be something to the county. In the case of an ordinance, it is something where you are intending to enforce it, and it's intended to be permanent. And in the case of a resolution, it's intended not to be enforced, and it's intended to be usually temporary. So I think this is something people need to keep in mind. When you elect officials, you need to have people who know how to read the documents, pay attention, and make decisions that truly represent what will stand up, both in court and also for the good of our town.
And with all these issues, would single-member districts work?
Well, this is an issue that was very much a hot-button issue in the last election. My feeling at the time on that subject, when we were asked, and we were asked in almost every single forum, was I really like for citizens to be able to vote in every election. The idea of having one person for your district for 4 years, which I understand why a lot of people think that would be really good, but then not vote in the in-between election, so you don't have any say in what happens then, it disturbs me. I don't think that's the right way to go. What I think a lot of folks have come around to is the idea that if we could have a hybrid, and I believe we have already checked, and this is something that's allowed under the state's constitution and governance, is that we could have something where, for instance, we had 4 districts that were the quadrants of Mount Pleasant, and then have 4 at large, and have it so that it rotates so that everybody is able to have a voice in every election.
Wow.
I'm not saying I'm necessarily going to push for that, but I would certainly be open to that idea. I do not think having something where you don't get to vote in some of the elections is ideal. I know there's a lot of worry about the balance of power. Are there too many people on one end of town? And what I would say to that is, every election people need to step up. If they think that we need representation from an area of town that's underrepresented, run for office, because that's the best way to have that area be represented, is if you're stepping out to do it.
And yes or no, strong mayor, weak council, or strong council, weak mayor?
So this one is another hot button issue. As my good friend Mayor Pro Tem Tom O'Rourke will say, well, show me the mayor. And I'll tell you whether I like strong mayor or not. What we have is a strong council, or a council form of government, where the mayor is a messaging person, a figurehead. They're the first person typically called by the news. They're also the first person that would be going. They also serve as ex officio on a number of very important boards, such as Charleston Aviation Authority, the Patriots Point Development Authority, and the Mount Pleasant Waterworks Commission. And so it's a critical role. It is not the role in our current form of government of hiring and firing staff. It's not the role of preparing the budget. The mayor, like all of council, votes on the budget, debates about it, can make changes as much as necessary, but doesn't do the actual initial preparation work. Same thing with the staff. We have our town administrator who does an excellent job, and his job is to oversee the staff day to day. I believe that what Mount Pleasant most likely needs, and I'm not, again, advocating for this today, I'm happy to fulfill the role of mayor and do more than fulfill. I will be a very active mayor. I'm already a very active council member. I'm all over the place all the time. I will do whatever is needed to serve 95,000 people in this town. But if at some point council were to decide that it needs to be a full-time mayor rather than a part-time position, I would be able to transition over to that because I probably will already be doing at least 40 hours of work because of the way I am energy-wise. That might be something that we can do, and I don't believe that requires a referendum. If we were to go to a strong mayor, weak council form of government, I think we have to make sure. The problem is it's elected by the people every 4 years, and you actually could have somebody who's elected where they don't have the skill set for hiring and firing staff, where they don't have the skill set. And you might say, well, yeah, other towns have it. A lot don't. But a lot that do have gotten into a lot of trouble. We can look across this country over the last year and see a lot of situations where people were elected that ended up, we had tons of problems. So I'm very, very much for a strong representation of the people. And the council, in my opinion, could accomplish this even better if we had a more proactive council that meets more regularly with the public, not just sits back in the meetings and waits for things to be brought. So.
And to be continued. Capu Landing, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Full House.
Well, thank you, Quintin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.